goal of this project sort of started as a part of another project. We were doing and working on the oral histories of African Americans in College Station, sharing their experiences, and mostly we started talking with residents in the McCullough area near the Lincoln Center. And as those interviews progressed and some names of prominent families were shared, we realized that many of the streets in College Station are named after those families, and thought it would be a really cool idea to do a little bit of a deeper dive and find out a little bit more about those families. And in doing so, found out that many of them made some significant contributions to the African American community, which basically contributed to College Station as well. There are actually several African American neighborhoods in College Station. One that everyone knows is the McCullough neighborhood, but there are actually a couple of others. One of the other ones is the Richards and Sterling Street area across the street from Target in that area. As well as the third area is the area off of Lincoln Street in Paisler, where there are many streets over there named after African American families that made significant contributions to our community. Tarot Street is named for the principal of the Lincoln School, W.A. Tarot, but there are also Bank Street, Peyton Street, Gilbert Street, Pierce Street, Columbus Street. All of those streets are named after prominent African American families that were very well known and made significant contributions, particularly in the faith community here in College Station.
The Washington family was one of the first families that lived in College Station. Joshua Washington, which was my husband's great-great-grandfather, owned many acres, over 100 acres in the Wellborn College Station area. Sam Richardson was another family member who had Richard Street named after him. They also had a part of the College Station Cemetery where many family members are buried there. And then the church, Washington Chapel, still exists, which was one of the earliest churches founded in the 1800s and has a historical marker.
My dad was Daniel Washington. He married Addie Lee Washington. Everybody called her Tot. There were several ministers for Washington Chapel that, of course, I didn't know. The only pastors of Washington Chapel that I can remember is that Reverend L.W. Flowers. He came here in 1946, and he stayed, I think it was 30 or 32 years, and then his health started to fail, and they asked Reverend Garvin to come and assist him with the services. And when Reverend Flowers passed away, the church voted to have Reverend Garvin become the pastor of Washington Chapel Baptist Church. And during this time, Reverend Garvin was responsible for the church getting the historical marker, being one of the 8th oldest churches in College Station.
Within the College Station Cemetery, there are actually 2 other cemeteries that are located in there. There's the General College Station Cemetery, and then there's a section for many of the families in the area who were of Czech descent. And then there's the section where mostly their residents were African American descent. And that is the area that is marked as the Salem Cemetery within the College Station Cemetery, where many of the black families that we will be discussing are buried currently.
First of all, I want to point out that the cemetery now is marked as Salem Cemetery, but that is really not correct, because the old records for burials all state that Washington Chapel Cemetery is where they are. So some people get confused about that. But the oldest tombstone in the Washington Chapel Cemetery is Mary Cotton, and she passed away about 4 years old in 1915. I got to thinking about it as I started getting really interested in researching the residents of all of these cemeteries. And I thought, wow, if the church was formed the very end of 1894, but the oldest tombstone here is 1915, you've got a 20-year time period in there, so there have to be a lot of unmarked graves here. So I was really fascinated with the whole thing, and that's when I contacted Professor Mark Everett over at the geophysics department at A&M, and we got ground-penetrating radar, and they came out, did all the survey, and we have a record now of around 53 to 54 unmarked graves in this land right here. So I'm very anxious at some point to get some kind of a memorial, maybe a bench or something like that out here, and find a way to actually recognize all of these folks. There are actually 4 that are supposed to be here that were born during the time of slavery. And we have 10 men who fought in the wars for us.
There are many members of the African American community, and many of the families that we've researched and looked into are buried in that section, the Salem section of the College Station Cemetery. They're members of the Walden family, the Washington family, the Gilbert family, the Richardson family, the Pierce family, and the Chew family, one being Eddie Chew and his wife.
He was an incredible individual. He did so many things, and he was quite a community leader. He started the Boy Scouts. He did Red Cross training. He just did all kinds of things. But the thing that the Aggies and so many A&M people will be interested in, if they don't already know it, is that Eddie Chew was the original owner of our beloved Reveille 1. She was a puppy that the Aggies found when she had run away from home briefly, and Eddie Chew could not stand the idea of taking that puppy away from the Aggies. So it was very interesting. He let them keep the puppy, and he also worked for A&M for a number of years before he was part of the College Station ISD. And when Reveille 1 passed away, the president of Texas A&M called Eddie Chew and said, "Would you like to bury your dog?"
About a year ago, after talking with some of the members in the McCullough neighborhood, one of the historically African-American communities here, we really realized that so many of the elders in that community were passing away, and that realizing that their stories had not been chronicled, they'd not been shared. And Dr. Carolyn Walden, who's been just a force in that neighborhood and in our community, reached out and said, "Hey, I think it'd be a good idea if we found a way to start chronicling some of these people's stories." And so it also went to our Historic Preservation Committee, who got on board and thought it was a great idea to start to gather some of these stories. And so we did. We reached out and got names of people to share with us, people who were still alive and who would be willing to share their stories of just what College Station was like in their experiences many years ago. And so that's how it began. And so we've talked to people that told us a little bit about what it was like when the Lincoln School was there, what Juneteenth was like back then, and just a general feeling of what the community was like. What was College Station like before College Station was College Station? And so we started to interview some of those elders, because we felt like having their stories is very important. It sheds a lot of light on where we are today, and it also gives future generations an opportunity to be able to know where they came from and to appreciate all that was done to get them to this point where they are today. We're outside of College Station.
Okay, it was south of College Station in a area that I named myself,
And what is that?
Plum Nelly,
Plum Nelly, Texas.
Plum Nelly, Texas.
So where is that?
Well, that's plumb out of College Station and Nelly about to Welbert. I graduated in 1965,
Okay.
the last class to graduate from Lincoln High School.
Okay.
Lincoln was very special because it was a small school, 1A at that time. That was the classification. And everybody, all of the students, knew each other. And it was just like family. That's the reason today we get along so good, because we grew up together from a very young age.
I played basketball. Of course, we had 2 courts. And couldn't run track. But I could sure play basketball and softball.
Okay.
Very bad in that.
There were 2 schools in our district that stood out. There was Lincoln and Taylor. in Taylor, Texas. If we didn't win district, they was winning district. So yes, we had some outstanding athletes to come through Lincoln High School. And here's the bad part about it. We didn't have the budget to purchase a lot of our practice uniform. So we had to get practice shoes and clothes, equipment from A&M Consolidated. And sometimes it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best. The only equipment that we had, I can say it was new, and I'm sure we didn't have the budget, so Consolidated probably bought it for us, was our uniform, our game uniform, because our color was purple and gold.
I was the last class that was at Lincoln. And then I went to A&M Consolidated in 1966. The following year was when the school mysteriously burned down. It was heartbreaking. And I do remember I was there and I watched it burn. Yeah, and everybody was so sad. It was just a solemn night. People were hugging and crying, and it was not a good scene because Lincoln had meant so much to so many people. Then all of a sudden, it's no more. It was just gone. Lincoln School was like this enormous family where everybody loved each other. Everybody was for each other. There was so much harmony in Lincoln School, and so many brothers and sisters, and everybody was everybody's brothers and sisters, and people not just at school, in the community, it was the same camaraderie. There were just so many wonderful families that lived in this general area. Also, the Wellborn community was also a part of Lincoln.
Okay. So they
And-
went to school there too?
Yes, they were. They rode the bus, but they were students at Lincoln High School.
So that was the only school for black students?
That was the only school for blacks, Lincoln High School.
I cannot conclude until I mention this about a man. He's deceased now. This guy's name is Charles Banks.
Oh, yeah, Charles, thanks.
He was an outstanding basketball player here at Lincoln.
Right, yeah.
He played on, they changed the name of the college, but I think it was Texas Western when he was playing. And they won the national championship. And he went on to play a little while with the Harlem Globetrotters.
Wow.
Yeah. From Wellborn,
Wow.
Texas. And when Charles went to college on a basketball scholarship, he also went to play with Bobby Hill, which was from Brown, Kemp. They played at the same university or college, I think, at that particular time. They played Kentucky in the national championship and won it.
Okay.
The teacher that I had, he was a basketball coach. He was the coach of this Charles Banks that I just mentioned. I never played basketball, but he was a mentor. As a matter of fact, I
Absolutely.
patterned myself after him when I started teaching secondary. He was a PE teacher when I started teaching secondary PE. He was ahead of his time. And I had a chance, before he died, I had a chance to tell him that he was a mentor of mine, and I admired him.
I was working over here part-time under Marcy
Yes,
Rogers.
Rogers.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that's right.
She hired me. Actually, go back to Steve Beachy.
Mr. Beach.
I come over here and I saw just how out of place the kids were. And I say, would you give me a job? Just like that. He looked at me, he said, yeah, you hired. Never got a job that quick. Girl, and he hired me, and I came over, I worked 5 years over here with the kids, getting them corrected.
Yeah.
They need guidance.
Yes.
And I saw that I could do it.
Could do that.
Even the one that were bad, I can't go nowhere now. They remembered me. I remembered you. You worked at Lincoln Center, and you would not let us fight or do nothing. I said, you're right. But who are you? And at that time, you know, they was at 18, 20 years, somebody that, if they hit me, they would have knocked me down,
Yeah.
but they for some reason, I guess my attitude,
They respected you.
they respected me, and they respect me right now.
Pleasant Grove moved to this spot here. There was another tragedy 15 years or so ago. Salem Church caught on fire, and it was, the damage was so great until they weren't able to go back into their church. And a very dear friend of mine who's gone to glory, Pastor Cedric Goodman, was pastoring the church, and they started having church at Lincoln Center. And several years later, the Lord called Cedric Goodman home. And they have another pastor now, Pastor Robinson, who is doing a wonderful job, great, wonderful person. And many of the members of Salem, they're still there, they're still committed, they're still continuing to go on.
Lucille and I grew up on segregation time, right? And let me just give you some, and so maybe you can picture what I'm going to tell you. At this grocery store, hot liquor, they had, you walk in, front door of it. Front door was facing Welborn Road, so you walk in, and that was the groceries area. In the back was a little area where the blacks would go if they wanted to go in and drink beer, eat a barbecue sandwich. And off to the right was a big club area for the whites to socialize, okay? And basically that's the way it was during that particular time. Separate but unequal.
Yes.
The transition was relatively smooth. Of course, there still were some issues that integration brought about. Some were skeptical, some were apprehensive, some did not want it
Right.
on either side. And it was a little rigid from time to time, but the transition was relatively smooth. Now, let me say this. Integration was not the best thing that happened to our community. You would probably see so much more of what you don't see in our community, in our people, had there still been a Lincoln High School, because I do not think that the best is on one side or the other.
We had a movie place right down off of Welborn, Smithy's Grill. We used to eat, cook, go to movies. The grown folks met on one side, and the children, you know how they would bring them out, and we would go to the movie. So that was where we went to movies
Really?
in College Station.
Was it black owned?
Yes. Charlie Smith.
It was a grocery store. Here again, it's located right on Welborn Road.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it was
brought our grubs.
it was it was located west of
Were those
of
apartments?
Lincoln Center. Yes. As a matter of fact, it was on the other side of Southgate Apartments.
okay.
It was a grocery store. Now I know that very well because my grandparents them had a a grocery bill there, that he would go get groceries and make their payment at the end of the month when they got there. My grandfather was a World War I vet, so therefore when he got his vet check, he was go pay that bill and
That grocery.
get groceries again. Uh-huh. And we call it the hot liquor.
Yeah. I don't know why we got the name from her.
I think the person that owned that name was Fritz.
Okay.
Fritz Hardliquor.
Yeah, we just call it hot liquor. Uh-huh.
One of the reasons I wanted to do the project was you can read books and information about different people, but when you have firsthand knowledge, you actually get to watch the videos and hear the person's testimony. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do this project to begin with. And the people that we interviewed, they have so much wisdom and knowledge. And so before they go on, that we wanted to make sure that we recorded everything, the information that they had to say about where they grew up, the history, behind it all, their families, important events. So it was very interesting to do the project.
We're so glad that so many of you got a chance to come out and see these interviews and find out more about these incredible families who left their mark and their fingerprints on College Station. This project is ongoing. If you have family members or friends or ideas on ways that we can continue to chronicle the stories of these families, please reach out and let us know. These interviews in their entirety can be found on the city's historic online database, also known as Project Hold. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, please reach out to us. We thank you so much for coming out, and we look forward to continuing this project and finding out more about our African American citizens here in College Stations and their contribution to our community.